to order. Asa Melina, can you please read the roll call of commissioners?
Chair and Commissioner Aldrin Bonilla.
Here.
Vice Chair and Commissioner Elaine Reese.
Present.
Commissioner Minoska Alcantara.
Present.
Commissioner Ngozi Okaro.
Here.
And Commissioner Nicole Yearwood.
Here.
So we have a quorum. First order of business, we have the approval of the minutes from October 30th, 2025. Motion to approve. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Okaro. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Abstention? Abstentions hearing none. Motion passes. Next, we have the approval of the audit resolution, 2025 termination resolutions. We have none. And we have subsection B, 2025 compliance resolutions. Is that you? Can you read them into the record, please?
Yes, so we have compliance resolutions for Queens Community Board number 10, the New York City Police Department, Queens Community Board number 14, Queens Community Board number 3, Queens Community Board number 1, Manhattan Community Board number 10, Queens Community Board number 7, Queens Community Board number 5, Queens Community Board number 2, the Office of the Kings County Public Administrator, Queens Community Board number 4, and Manhattan Community Board number 3.
Do we have a motion to adopt 1 through 12 as a bundle?
So moved. No.
We have a second?
No.
No, because you're gonna abstain from some, right?
Yeah.
Or recuse rather.
Recused from, I think 7 is the only one.
Queens Community Board number 7.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll take out Queens Community Board number 7 for this vote and do 1 through 6, 8 through 12. Do we have a motion to pass resolutions, compliance resolutions 1 through 6, 8 through 12?
So moved.
That's so moved by Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Okaru. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next, we have a motion for resolution Queens Community Board
Number 7. So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Reese. Second.
Second.
Second, Commissioner O'Connor. We have not many options here for seconding. We have all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No, you're not aye.
I know. Sorry.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Next, we have the 2025 final determination compliance resolution. We have no business under that subsection. Next, we turn to subsection
Question.
4. Yes.
I'm gonna look how many audits have we completed as of this year?
So we're up to compliance number 44 for the year. We originally wanted to get to 58. That includes some from last year with all the ones from this year, but we were able to get to 44.
And so we've met our mandate, but we didn't last year. Is that what?
Yes, last year we didn't have the around 30s
Okay.
or so compliance resolutions. So yeah.
All right. I'm just concerned that we continue to meet our annual requirement.
Wait, but question, did
Yes.
we meet the so we didn't meet the mandate based on our standard, but did we meet the mandate based on the controller standard?
Yes,
Okay,
we met based on it.
so that's what I'm good with that. Thank you.
Next, we have subsection 4, old business audit standards update.
Yeah, so we did provide the commissioners with a current draft of the audit standards. We did receive some feedback.
I provided mine a little bit late last night, but no one else could provide it. It was earlier and mine aligned a lot quicker.
But I have a question. So this is what you would be using as for audit for the next 4 years. Is that correct?
As of now, yes.
Okay. So let me go back to what I was talking about before.
Mhm.
And that is really a concern about, as opposed to reasonable accommodations, a concern about where Black women, Black female employees are within the city. It is my understanding, based on the media, so I don't have any data other than that, that in the current economic situation, people who are who've been losing their jobs or losing employment and therefore losing salary, the greatest number happen to be Black women. Now, I don't know that as a fact, I just know that from media. And it seems to me that as we did with sexual harassment, looking at how the city was complying with the issue of sexual harassment, we want to be looking at where Black women are employed within the city, whether they are treated equally or whether they are siphoned into areas where have lower wage than Black men or than anybody. Forget about whether it's Black men than anybody else, and whether or not they have lost their jobs at a greater number and have left the city at a greater number than other groups. So yes, I understand reasonable accommodation, but I think we have a greater urgency dealing with Black women.
I think, and I think it's important for us to have a common understanding first of what audits are, right? So audits really are auditing against federal, New York State, and New York City EEOC frameworks. So it has to be law, regulations, or practices that we're audited against. In terms of some of the issues you raised, definitely that's under the purview of the research reports, and Local Law 13 could be a special deep dive into that. And in terms of where Black women work and how that affects, let's say, pay disparities, our report did have some information on that.
Yeah.
So some of what you request, the EEPC already addresses. We do need more updated data, that's for sure, because I think the report that I'm referencing is probably 2 years old now. But in terms of the audit standard, it'll be important for you to just like list what the regulation or law is and then what the audit standard is against that. So that's what I would say.
And I would say the data that's being reported is that is national data. So it's not necessarily city specific. And I think the greater impact has been around the changes in the federal agencies. But I do agree with the chair. I think that's something that we look at. Pay disparities have been widely known. It didn't just start. And then the occupational disparities, which I think that's what we look at in Local Law 13, correct? Like the occupational,
correct.
Yeah.
Now,
But we also look at in auditing, we're looking at hiring and where people are placed. I mean, we are looking at titles as we audit. We are looking at what we don't know and what we don't have is why people leave and what terminations are. And that's not something I think necessarily that we have the ability to audit without there being a mandated something from GCAS that mandates some termination, something following up terminations. But we do have the ability to look at what has happened. While you're absolutely right, Nicole, it is really nationals that the media is reporting. We don't know what the impact has been on the city, and we don't know whether the city is following a different pattern. And so we have the ability, I think, even to audit. In some sense, it's discrimination. And so looking at it just to a ball, just the bold issue, we have to look at discrimination. Are women being terminating or leaving at a greater number, Black women at a greater number than any other group?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The thing is that, and it goes a little bit to what I mentioned for several years now about the minimum standards. Look, we are auditing against standards. So, for example, under reasonable accommodation, we can audit against whether people who ask for reasonable accommodations, and I'm not sure this is actually, we can audit against the standard that if they have been denied a reasonable accommodation or asked to come back to work because there's undue hardship on the agency, we can see whether that's, did you provide a undue hardship analysis, right? We cannot, and the staff here can correct me, and this is where the local law goes into, we cannot necessarily, not for the audit, see if the folks who ask for reasonable accommodations and are terminated in relation to that, be it retaliation or not, the agency could have followed a lot of the different audit standards that we have, or they could have not. To the extent that they have not followed them, maybe there could be a deeper dive that are Black women more susceptible to being terminated after making a reasonable accommodation claim and not having the agency giving them a reasonable undue hardship analysis. You see what I mean? This is audits are completely about objective practices, regulations, and procedures.
So if I ask for a reasonable accommodation for childcare needs and it has not been met, no attempt has been made for me to work remotely a couple of days, and I happen to be a Black female, what is that? Are there more Black females that ask for that and then are terminated?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but that's not, the audit doesn't get to that level, right? Of demographics, right?
We don't usually break it down where we're looking at that specifically for the standard. We would sometimes get some of that information, but not in that way. So it'll be encompassed in the overall data that we get sometimes, but then we would have to drill down on it to be that, specific.
Yeah. So for example, in my notes yesterday, I mentioned there's a stipulation within the statute of constructive dialogue, right? And that when we audit, we say, is there constructive dialogue? Well, how do you operationalize that? Do you just take the word of the agency that says, I told you you were going to get terminated and by such and such date? How is that constructive dialogue? So what I suggested in my email yesterday is that we try to dig deeper into what does constructive dialogue actually mean. Mm-hmm. So is there a vesting period? Is it beyond just acknowledgement that you told the employee, if you don't come back to work on the 17th, even though your doctor said you can't come back to the 29th, you're going to be terminated? So I'm pushing us through our auditing duties to try to get closer to what, the standards are in terms of lived experience. And my email yesterday spells out a whole host of areas where I feel that we could push a little bit more than just telling people, do you have the log, that you gave this and the complaint was on this date and then that, so to get a little bit more at the quality of the either reasonable accommodation interaction with the agency, or there's a whole host of areas, whether cooperative dialogue, undue burden analysis. Some agencies tell the employee, you must come back to work X date because we are facing an undue burden by your absence. Okay, I think the law requires a little bit more than just somebody saying undue burden. How so? What is it that I'm not doing, at home remote that I should be doing in person? So delving a little bit deeper into it, and I put that in writing for you both. And I don't know if you probably haven't had time to review or comment on that, but that's kind of what I was getting at in terms of the audit standards. How do we fine tune them a little bit to push the agencies a little bit more, that we have an eye on, just not that you did this and you checked off a box, but the quality of how you did it.
And I do want to say I do appreciate Commissioner Reese, you raising the issue here, but I just feel like these are things that Black women have experienced in the workplace, for a long time, and that it's now just kind of being amplified more recently due to especially the changes in the federal workforce, where we do have some impact in New York City because there are federal, there are people who work in the federal system who reside here all over the country. But I feel like I know that there's a greater impact through other organizations I'm a part of in specific areas of the country, but it's not, I don't think that this is necessarily something that is a new phenomenon.
Nor is sexual harassment a new
Yeah.
phenomenon.
Yeah.
So where I'm coming from is, wouldn't it be nice to know the city was better? And that it wasn't a problem here,
Yeah.
rather than it is a problem. But what we don't know is we don't know what the status is.
Right. I mean,
We have rough numbers from what Russell has shown, and it hasn't moved, but we still, I believe, know, based on what we have discovered in data, is that Black women are in certain job descriptions and not in others.
Right.
That they're not in leadership positions. And whether that is something that is endemic to the society, or whether there are things within the city that could be done, but unless you know what the problem is, you can't address it. So I understand that.
but I would say, I mean, I just want to clearly articulate, what the part of the reason why we're seeing the problem is the type of jobs that we're changing. So there's specific roles. So for instance, DEI roles, a lot of Black women were in those particular roles. I don't think that we've seen that in New York City government, those cuts in those roles in government agencies. In terms of, you know, the issue I know on the federal level, entire agencies being closed for the things that had an impact. We didn't have that happen in New York City. Like, there has been no city agency that was completely shut down and released thousands of employees. If listen, I feel like the city, we still are talking about how we have vacancies in city employment. Right. And so what I've been trying to do to address that issue is make sure that people are aware that the city does have job openings, so that if they are unemployed, that I think last time I checked, we were 20,000 vacancies in city employment. And I feel like it's been that way since I've been appointed, which was in 2022, that we had a lot of vacancies.
Well, it continues to be that way, because that's the way the city saves money.
True, also. But no, but I feel like the conversation, and I know we're going in another direction, in terms of city, they were starting to see impacts on agencies and the service delivery. So I think that that's where they did start to the city started making an effort to hire people.
So
But,
in terms of the audit standards update, what would be helpful? So you got feedback from Commissioner Alcantara, you got some feedback from me. I know other commissioners have weighed in. What would be helpful for you in terms of moving forward? Because some of the feedback is very substantive, you know, regarding, for example, retaliation. We're a little bit mum on that in terms of interim, like how to deal with people who make who make a complaint and how they're treated while their complaint is being investigated. Things around interim measures while they're waiting for an outcome. So there's a whole host of areas that could be improved around the audit standards. So how can we proceed, you think? What's the best way to proceed?
So I think we're gonna have to, first of all, I got the email this morning, so it was forwarded to me this morning, so I can't comment specifics. But having taken a quick look at it, I think it would be important to kind of put it into various buckets, what we can accomplish through an audit and what is more of like recommendations to DCAS to strengthen and improve EO policy, we can only, it's what you were saying, the audit is the audit and the standards are the standards. We can only apply some of those changes if the law or policy is already there, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think we're gonna have to kind of go through the points one by one and say, this is, we can incorporate these into the audit standards, or we can't, but this does have merit, this point, but we need to address it in a different way and not through the audit. It could be through a recommendation to DCAS, for example.
Or continued research.
Or continued research, right, exactly. So
Or
it's kind of,
yeah.
I think they're all, I can't say all, because I like I said, I quickly looked through the email this morning. I'm sure they're all valid points, but some we can act on, some we can't, and kind of organizing it. So I think that's kind of, at least from my perspective, what the next step would be. I don't know if you have any.
No, I agree, exactly.
When is the next audit supposed to begin?
No, Jenny.
Yeah, Jen, yeah, typically. it will-
Well, I'm just looking at it in terms of a time frame and what additional input you need from us and under what our clock is. If you began your audit, the audit for the next 4 years in February, and you lost a month, would that do severe damage to you, or could you, so that we have more time to comment and get back to you so that we're on the same page? And do we have a meeting in January?
Yeah, there have been a few times, I think the last time we were at this kind of stage, we did start the cycle a little bit late that year as well to finalize the current audit that we're on. So I do think it will be manageable. It will have some impact, but I do think it will be manageable. And
I'm
think
trying to look at a reasonable clock, because I think whatever you're going to change, we ought to review it before you go forward, and there's a clock running. It's going to be Christmas, and it's not going to happen between now and Christmas. So,
I think, I'm sorry.
do we
I
have a
think
January meeting?
if, you know, we could begin the processing, there's a lot of administrative process around the audit before, in terms of alerting them that there'll be an audit, lining up the audit. And so I think that part could begin while we work on, I mean, the audit is 80% there. I mean, my comments and Minosa's comments, I think, are to push on the areas where it says, where there needs more clarity around the definition, or more audit on the outcome, or on the procedure taken, things of that sort.
I do think that Michael's point, which was made following Commissioner Alcantara's email, like I think it was from last week, her feedback, that again, this goes to going through each point by point. Some of the feedback is addressed in the policy, so at the agency level, so it might not be written in our audit standards, but it's because it's in the EEO policy. So we wouldn't necessarily refer to it again in the standard unless we're checking that, you know, one of the standards says, does the EEO officer report directly to the agency head? That is one of one of the things that we're looking at. But some of the points.
And that, for example, that standard we verified by looking at the organizational chart.
Right. I mean, that would be one of the ways that we would make it.
And there are other ways.
I actually have a question at that. So what happens when you have a very small unit, when you only have 10 people in the unit, and some of the units that we look at are that tiny? And what happens when you deal with the community boards? I mean, that unit generally is what, 5 or 10 employees at best.
We have best practices on that now.
So what do you waive that?
No, there are alternative.
Yeah, so basically, for the way the community boards, EEO offices are structured, right, they don't have their own independent EEO offices, they rely on the borough president, so for that reason, we don't look at certain specific things done, you know, at the community board level. For the community board specifically, we look to see that they have the policies, they're aware of the policies, they
Right, so there's a
and then when we
automatic
audit the borough
judgment.
president, then we will look at,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a certain amount of judgment that's involved when you have a very small unit. Got it.
And in areas where there is an EEO officer who is performing other functions, or the EEO officer functions, the EEO officer is supposed to report directly to the agency head, even though in their non-EEO functions, they may not. So there are workarounds with smaller agencies.
I don't know if I can be heard, but a
Yes,
quick thing is, Michael, could you send us the document that I sent and reference to the policies and send us the policies? Because I knew that I was flying blind because I didn't have the policies. But it will be good to see the policies, so to make sure that we understand it the same way, and if we have questions about the policies, then we can ask the questions as well.
Sure. So the policy is I can send it in an email to everybody. It's just a link to DCAS's citywide EEO policy, and agencies are supposed to follow that policy. They can create their own agency specific policy and we would audit that policy if there is something that the agency has rewritten. But the EEO, the citywide policy, is the minimum that they have to offer to their employees, that they have to follow. But yes, I can certainly forward the DCAS EEO policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
But because we're doing a deeper dive around reasonable accommodations is informed by laws, policies, and regulations above just the de minimis compliance policy, correct? The New York City Human Rights Commission, which is the best in the country on this matter, has a prevailing framework for us, right? So that, you know, the reason we want to go into reasonable accommodation, right, is that particularly the pandemic and after, whether telework, whether people have other needs to medical and otherwise, childcare, other things mentioned, that we want to do a deep dive on this, right? For things such as that everyone is treated, that everything is communicated to folks what the policy is, that if there's reports that need to be done, like undue, burden on the agency, whether there's retaliation, like, but we wouldn't get as far in this audit as someone does a reasonable accommodation or complaint, and then let's say they're terminated 72 hours later, right? Our audit doesn't necessarily will capture that, right?
Not necessarily.
And that we all agree that's such an important data point. But the idea is that I guess our audit will capture if it won't capture maybe that it will terminate 72 hours later, but it would it should, right? It would capture no, but in terms of what we audit, I don't think we audit, but it will be captured in a log, right? Some kind of log, or
it could.
Maybe a log is not required for reasonable accommodations.
We do currently have a standard in it to look at reasonable accommodation log, and it's
adopted by the agency. Okay, that's okay, yeah. So things that is what we would be.
Wouldn't it also be captured in a complaint? If they complain?
Yeah,
I mean, there's also things to keep in mind that a lot of these, a lot of employees have civil service status, so they couldn't just be terminated. They would have to go through a whole disciplinary process and follow, step 1, step 2 charges. So
an appeal,
right? So I don't know. Just that's just a statement. Yeah.
And some don't, right? Some are not subject to it.
Some are not subject to it, right?
All right. So Anything else from us, from the commission, that as you proceed with this?
I think like Adriana said, next steps will be for us to kind of go through some of the points, see what kind of baskets we can put few things in, follow up with you all, and then you all.
And then the evaluative metric or rubric that you use, is there something, is it more elaborate than just meets the standard, exceeds the standards, fails the standard, needs corrective
Yeah,
action?
so
Is it more than that, or just pretty much what I just said? It's kind of like the evaluative rubric.
no, so once we have the standards locked in, we'll usually have accompanying compliance criteria, and the criteria might be more specific than the standard itself. So we'll have certain parameters laid out to make sure that they're meeting it. So the criteria often is a little more expansive sometimes than the standard. It can be a little more specific.
Because some of what I included in my comments, I think might be more under the criteria. Okay,
From what I glanced through, I think so.
okay.
What's reasonable to anticipate is in our reviewing the actual questions before you go forward? What is reasonable in terms of your being able to complete them and reasonable in terms of our being able to review them?
I think it might partially depend on when the next
The next
meeting
meeting.
is.
I think that's what we have to decide today.
Oh, we don't have next year's calendar?
No, so
Oh,
we should,
Oh, that's one of the
Yeah,
items. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you for that. Kimberly, 2026, folks.
No.
Oh,
and at the very least, we can come up with a January date, and then
Of
at the
course.
January date,
yeah.
address the rest of the, I don't.
That makes sense to me, so that we are reviewing it at the January date, whatever that is. Okay, before you go
Let's
forward.
look at all
That's
that.
my request.
All right. Next order of business, well, can we move on to the next order of business? Next order of business is the quadrennial audit cycle plan.
All right, so as we did discuss a little bit, this year marks the end of our current quadrennial audit cycle, and as we prepare for the next quadrennial audit cycle, we will need you all to approve it. In a general sense, because we haven't had any agencies that ultimately were not compliant, we can follow the same audit cycle, 4-year cycle that we did for 2022 to 2025, for 2026 to 2029. That would also put us in line with the comptroller schedule, similar to what we did. So in the last cycle, we updated it to align with the comptroller's audit period. And if we follow the same plan for 2026 to 29, we'll be in the same.
So 2026 would repeat what happened in 2022.
Yes.
Same agency,
Same
same size, whatever, no changes, whatever.
Yeah.
And you do it going forward.
No new agencies or agencies that have been disbanded?
Yeah, so that's the next item, but so
Oh,
there,
sorry.
yeah, no, it's fine. So there
Yeah.
are a few agencies that we were aware of that have, either a separate EO program, expanded, separated out, etc. Currently there are about 3, and myself and Adriana would just look into it to make sure that they're under our jurisdiction, and then we would add them to the current audit plan. So that would be the only change to the audit, the quadrennial cycle, is if these agencies are indeed under our jurisdiction and we do need to include them, then we would add them in.
And how many are there?
Right now, 3 that we're looking at.
So why don't you just add one a year?
We could do what?
So wait,
Okay.
I think that the question precedent is,
First,
are they included?
Yeah.
Right, before we, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but once we determine they're under our jurisdiction, then we see where we can place them.
Okay. What are they, just for information?
Okay. So the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice,
That's cool.
and the New York City Commission on Racial Equity. And I know they would have separate EO offices from the overall Mayor's Office, so. And they're newer. I know 2 of them, I think, have it last year.
How would you determine whether we had jurisdiction?
And why wouldn't we?
Wow.
I mean, I think having their own, sometimes like the community boards, how they will use the EEO officer of
Oh,
the
the borough
borough president, then their audit would be different. So the two of the three we know have their own dedicated EEO officer. So we could look at their program. The third one, we're just waiting on confirmation.
Thank you.
And will the agencies necessarily continue? Like is it possible that the new mayor could say like, oh, we don't need this agency?
I believe all three are by
Charter.
charter. Yeah,
Okay.
so it would be a chart. Yeah,
Charter change.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's all three actually. So unless there's a charter. Yeah.
Unless there's a new charter change.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which there may be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next is the 2026 meetings calendar.
Thank you, Commissioner Reese. So let's proceed accordingly to 2026 meetings calendar. We have a handout that gives us the
So
options.
we don't have a
Proposals?
a proposal yet for the overall
Oh,
calendar. The idea was, if possible, if you all could decide on the next meeting for January, and then at that meeting, we would have a
Okay.
full calendar for you all to.
Commissioners, any date you'd like to throw out?
Why don't we give them as much time as they need? So the fourth week in January, whatever that is, that following, and then normally meet on a Thursday, right? So the fourth Thursday in January, whatever that is my suggestion.
Sounds good to me.
That would be the,
It's the 22nd.
yeah, I think the 22nd would be great.
22nd.
It's actually 1,
Or is it too far away
2,
from
3,
this?
4.
one?
It's
No, it's not too
5
far.
weeks from
It's only
5 and a half weeks from today.
Which is okay, right? Within the charter.
Yeah.
With 8. Was it?
I actually have an appointment the 22nd at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Can anyone do Wednesday? That Wednesday?
Wednesday.
I can't do Wednesday.
You can do
Cannot?
Wednesday?
I could do Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Tuesday, January 20th.
Tuesday,
I
January
can
20.
move things around.
Yes.
Tuesday, January 20th, Commissioner
Not
Alcantara?
ideal, but
Give
Okay,
me
we'll
one
put
sec.
Oh, Lord, keep driving and zooming in, looking at the calendar.
She's still driving.
So, Tuesday, January 20th, that works for people?
She's checking commission.
Hold on, I'm
Okay.
checking.
over.
Okay, and then we would look at your audit plan by then, and if you had it before then and sent it to us before then, that probably would make it easier for us to discuss.
Yeah, I was
she said
gonna
it's all
say,
before.
January-
And I think you-
That day
January
before, I
20
can't,
works.
like yesterday.
Hold on a
was
second.
crazy.
Commissioner Alcantara, what did you say?
January 20th works for me.
Okay,
Great.
excellent.
You block it out now.
Okay,
All righty. Next, we have the audit update, section 6, subsection A, 2024 audit plan status update.
Yeah, so, the just general update is that we're finally done with the 2024 audit plan. They'll have the agency. So we can put that one to the press.
And the 2025 audit plan status update.
So for this one, so just to reiterate something I mentioned earlier, in terms of the comptroller standards, we have met our mandate. We issued all of the final determinations before the end of the calendar year. Now, in terms of how we'd like to look at it in terms of full compliance,
Correct.
through the compliance monitoring period, we were able to get 21 of the 35 agencies that were on this specific year's audit plan into compliance. So we have 14 still that need to get into compliance. but we're at about 60%.
Like some of those 14 come into compliance before year's end.
I do anticipate, so we had a few community boards that were on the cusp of needing this meeting. We had several conversations, but they kind of just missed it, so I do anticipate a few of those being in compliance before the end of the year.
And by our next meeting in January.
That ideally we'll be able to have, everyone at that time. We're going to push forward. So yeah, I think that is a possibility.
But we can always discuss the stick of having them come before us. I don't think any agency wants to do that in the new year. All right, thank you. So then we have research update, 7, subsection A, report updates.
I don't have anything. No, yeah.
And then do we have a motion to adjourn public session to go to executive session for the purposes of discussing personnel matters and work product? We have a second
Second.
by Commissioner Reese, a second by Commissioner Rio. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. We go into executive session now. So Commissioner Alcantara could participate in executive session. How? By staying up with the same link, or
Yeah, she could just stay on. I need to.
you hear that, Commissioner Alcantara?
Yes,
You can stay on with the same link.